You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. This week we're joined by Milena Suarez, a passionate advocate for the autistic community. Born in Bogotá, Colombia, Milena pursued psychology at the Universidad Católica de Colombia, working with victims of domestic violence before moving to the U.S. in 2020. Milena recently completed her master's in ABA and is a new board-certified behavior analyst in the state of Tennessee. Milena is driven by the potential of applied behavior analysis to transform autism services in Colombia and beyond. Join us as we discuss her journey, vision, and the global impact she aims to make. Welcome to the podcast, Milena Suarez.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I feel like your background is going to be so important for us to really understand, to dive into a lot of these topics. Do you mind just sharing a little bit about, what led you to specialize in autism, and particularly your focus on DEI within the field?
Yes, well, as you say, I used to work in forensic psychology, and I just decided to take a sabbatical year and travel. So I came to the United States to study English, but initially my plan was to go to Spain to do a master's program in forensic psychology. However, COVID started. I was looking into psychological fields here in the United States, and I found out about ABA, and I have never heard about that before in Colombia. I knew about behaviorism, but not specifically ABA, and I really love to learn things. So I was like, what is this? So I decided to start working as an RBT, and I just fell in love with this field, with the children, with the science. And so this led me to decide to do my master's program in ABA. But while I was an RBT, I faced so many challenges with cultural differences. And I just was doing some research about how is ABA in Colombia, how is life for autistic people in Colombia, because sometimes we think oh, I have never met someone with autism in my life. And then it's just because we don't have maybe the resources to get them diagnosed, or because maybe we have a stigmatization about what autism is. And actually recently someone from my family just got diagnosed, and I'm just incredibly happy that now we can have those tools to provide better care for our autistic community.
No, absolutely. I think there's so many times that when I lived overseas, one of the things that I reflect back on is now that I've been serving and a part of the autistic community as far as an advocate and a service provider for over 20 years, is that when I think back to when I was serving overseas, it's like, wow, you know what? I probably met so many people who had either developmental delays, could have identified autistic if the resources and awareness was there. And the community and the culture just treated it differently. Just from your perspective, because you have Colombia, but you also, if I am correct, served in Africa as well with the Global Autism Project. What are some of the differences as far as culturally in those locations with seeing the autistic community and identifying them?
Well, I think it's actually it was very interesting for me when I went to Kenya, because I saw so many similarities with Colombia. So for me it was okay, how everything works here. And they were, well, we need to teach them how the world is here, so they're prepared for going to school. So sometimes it can be hard to see how therapists are, because it's just they're different. They're teaching them different skills. To sit on the table, sometimes here we're just working on the floor. they're like culturally it's really important to sit at the table when they're in school. If not, they can be out and they will not be receiving like education. Also, like for them, sometimes is that the belief that being autistic is being like having the devil, or like maybe like the cultural considerations of like maybe parents invited so many people to the wedding, and like how can we are also supporting family to navigate those like challenges, because we cannot change like a whole cultural like country like at once or like fast. We can try our best to spread what autism is, but still they are going to face challenges in those countries like Colombia, in my country, that we don't have a lot of information about what autism is, what are the causes for that, what are like the possible like outcomes when you have a diagnosis, the importance to get a diagnosis. So it's like how like those things that really touch me is like how can we better like support families and like autistic communities to navigate those challenges that they will like face in their own like cultural spaces.
And I mean, just imagining kind of that scenario, and I'm thinking about some of those like macro level skills that you're walking away with that could easily be taught to every clinician in the US, or that are working alongside you right now in your clinics with ABS kids, is that I think of like, we should always be meeting somebody with right where they're at, that we need to respect the personal beliefs and respect the lifestyle and the culture of the individual. What are some of the other just high level macro things that you think, from your experience of working in different cultures, and then also having to move from Colombia and where you were probably within the majority of the culture there, to moving to Tennessee, where probably there aren't as many Colombians, would be my guess. Is that what would be some of those high level thoughts as far as like, I wish everybody had these skills when they're working across cultures?
Well, so many. I think for me specifically is like not making assumptions, because usually you tend to be like it's funny because it's like when I speak in Spanish, even with people that are not from Colombia, but when I speak in Spanish and I say where I am from, they're like, no, you're not from Colombia, because it's very famous, some like series or Netflix about what the accent is. So my accent is different of like the famous one on like Netflix series. So they're like, no, you're not from Colombia. Or like, that doesn't sound like Colombian. So it's kind of funny, those like assumptions that we make, just like without asking questions. So for me, it's super important that we do have like open-ended questions, that we don't make assumptions, that even if someone is part of like a cultural group, we also need to know that there are like subcultural groups, and that can be intersectional between those groups, and sometimes you have your identities a little bit stronger from one of those groups than the others. And that's why it's super important for me always like to ask. You ask those open-ended questions, and then with that information that you're receiving, then you can be a little bit more directive with your questions. Okay, we can go to this direction. It's also like understanding that what is good for me, it's not for everybody, and that's very sometimes we try to change people's mind of like our way, and it's no, what about if I ask this person why they think this is why they think that what they are doing it's important, so I can understand the importance of like that for that person, instead of like going and saying you're wrong and I am going to show you how to do things. Because once you have that information, like about the why, you can understand, and then you can work as a team, and then you can say, hey, you know what, I didn't know that, it's so interesting. And I love that. When I was studying English, I took classes with people from like so many places, and like talking about or like country or cultures. And sometimes you like, I realized that I had a lot of biases when I was studying English, because I had a lot of like pictures in my mind about cultures. And then when I was interacting with so many people from different countries, I just loved to ask questions and learned and learned. And I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that they were doing like this for this reason. And I think that it's very important. If we can understand, even if we don't agree, we can support or like clients or families, or like we can be like a better um, professional for like them.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you kind of went through the process of identifying your own biases and realizing that, we all have them, but it's recognizing them, being aware of them, and then being able to kind of sidestep and kind of move back and say, that's what I think, but I need to be open-minded to understand what everybody else's perspective on the same issues are. When we're talking about good care and treating their treatment within the autism community, one of the biggest challenges is that historically, when ABA is not done necessarily well or correctly, it's because we're telling somebody what they need to do, who they need to be, what skills they need to develop, and we're not including them in that care model. So when we're talking about DEI in the context of autism care, why is that so important for families and professionals to really understand what that relationship looks like?
I think that like, and like not even like thinking about like other countries, just like here in United States, Tennessee, we have like children from like so many different backgrounds. So for me, like DEI means that we have a wide range diversity, people that will need services, and we need to provide the same quality services for everyone, and they have access to those services. So what is this like important? Because we cannot choose what is our first language. Sometimes we cannot choose where we are like born in, or like what is our cultural background. We grew up with a lot of beliefs with like a specific environment. Uh, but that doesn't mean that because of that, you cannot have access to a service that will improve your life. So DEI in like the context of autism is not only about cultural background, it's also thinking that we are talking about neurodiversity. And as like neurotypical people, we're different. Like neurodiversity means that they're also so different, and they have different choices, they have different preferences. How can we ask them what they want for their life? Sometimes it's just like, no, but for like or non-vocal children, they cannot say, so we need to choose. No, we can include families, and we can also see what they're like wanting to do. We do have our preference assessments. What about if we observe and see what they are like leading to, and like offer those choices always? Like we don't like always have to talk to be able to take decisions, to make choices. And for me, it's like that means that we are including everybody, and that we're including families, and we are including like different perspectives.
That model that you're describing, as far as it's not our job to tell somebody what their values are. It's not our job to tell somebody that their belief systems or their goals are wrong. Our job is to empower an individual to be able to meet their values, their goals, their belief systems in the way that they can. So, I mean, I definitely see that. And when you look at the industry in general of mental health, behavioral health, autism care, DEI takes on another whole level. This is important because our identity oftentimes is hand in hand with our mental health. So when you were going through the process, because you've been integral in creating some trainings for the DEIB committee that you're a part of, what is it that drove you, and what is it within the field that you're working in right now that kind of hit you, as far as, is it the fact that we're not meeting our clients in the right place? Is it the fact that we're not increasing the language diversity of how we're actually engaging families? Are we creating more of an underserved population? What is it that drove you to create these trainings within your own organization?
Well, like the most important thing for me was when I was being part of like the parent trainings and I was interpreting for like parent trainings, and I realized that because of that language barrier, sometimes parents didn't like really know. uh, they were like afraid of ask questions, thinking that they were going to lose services if they were going to ask questions. Um, you're thinking about like I will sign everything that I am receiving so my child can have these services. Because I don't speak English, and if I don't speak English, where I am going to find services for my child? Now they're like accepting him or her, and I need to keep these services like as like I can. So for me, it was very touching, being part of those parent trainings. Also, when we were talking about some targets, and parents were like crying, so happy. Like I have seen a lot of improvement. Like my child is having a lot of like new skills, and they were incredibly grateful. But also sometimes they were like, I cannot communicate with my child. So my child knows how to speak English, but we don't understand him. So when he wants something, he's trying to tell us, and we are trying to translate, and we don't know what he's saying because sometimes it's not very clear. And then we are having a lot of like frustration, tantrums, like he is like all those things are happening at home. They're not happening at the center anymore, but it's happening at home because he has the skills to communicate in English, but we were not targeting that in their like home language. So for parents, it was like, I'm so grateful, but I also need to be able to communicate with my child. Can we do this? So like working on like programming in like two different languages, doing research about, is that like impacting their like ability to talk? No, it's not. It's actually great. It's the moment to do it when they're young. So we can like pair words. We can still teach English because they need to be ready to go to school. But we can pair all those words with the Spanish words, and they can know that sometimes like it's okay to say it both ways, and then they learn, okay, to discriminate. So to this person I will speak with these words, and with this person I will speak with these words. It's just amazing see how they were like having so much like improvement. I like with like specific behaviors that we wanted to decrease, only like improving that communication piece.
No, absolutely. And when I think about the quality of care, one of the biggest pieces to that, of course, is creating community, belonging for the family, is that I'm a part of my child's life and their development. And if you're not bridging that gap of language, of course, you're creating barriers. And the last barrier you want to create is between a child and their family. What are some of the other things when you're talking about quality of care? I mean, when I think about staffing, when I think about the programming for a child, when I think about even assessment tools, when I think about being able to get information or resources, like what are the things that keep us from being able to apply care equally across all cultures that we need to start working more and more diligently at?
Well, as you said, I think like the resources. Now that I am a BCBA and we can have the time to speak on the same languages with some families, it's like all the questions about what autism is. And sometimes there are like resources available, but they don't know how to find them. So it's really like sometimes it's really difficult for it, and I include myself when I don't want to ask something because I will feel like, oh, maybe I will just look like dumb to like know about this. So I always try to like talk to the families as we start services of like this is a safe space. So I don't know everything, and we can work together, and we will find answers together. So when they have questions, I'm like, okay, yes, actually there are resources, and I love to be always looking for like resources here in Tennessee for Spanish speaking families. Also resources that we have available about research and things that are also easy to read and not only like scientific articles that sometimes can be with a lot of jargon that, yes, they're in Spanish, but is that really easy to read? Is that really easy to understand? Are we really like using the vocabulary that we should be using? And that happens not only like when you're talking with like a non-English speaking parent, that's happening when you're talking to English speaking families too. We need to think about that. We need to be clear always and try to find the correct like words to talk to or families, because it's just like sometimes we love our science so much that we get into those words that only we are going to understand. Also, like for me, quality is also working together with other fields and
Mm-hmm.
talking to them in understandable terms. When I went to Kenya, that was one of the most important things. And it's like we were like working with so many different fields. And we were going to create a training about ABA, but like the group was like special education teachers, we have BCBAs, we have RBTs, we have physical therapists, occupational therapists. So we needed to sit all together and find a way to have a training that will be available for everybody, that
Mm-hmm.
everybody will use that, because sometimes yes, we can create something and we will be so passionate about it, but if it's not helpful, then we just lost our time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, there's the commonality of all of these disciplines being able to kind of correlate, but whether you're talking to another practitioner that's not in your field or you're talking to a family, the last thing that anybody wants to feel is that they're being talked down to or that they don't understand things, that they start to kind of pull back because somebody's talking above their knowledge set within a given domain. And that it creates a lack of trust. It's like, hold on, you're talking to almost somebody that's not in this room, because the people in this room, we don't understand what you're trying to tell us right now. And take it down a level, communicate on a personal level with me. When we're trying to be able to look at the community of providers right now, is that there is a mismatch. There's not enough providers that are going to represent every cultural population that we need to be able to represent in the field. And even as we're trying to grow provider bases, and we should be investing more and more resources to be able to match the provider to the recipients of care. So we need to grow the clinical base. We have to find solutions in the interim. I know that you've had a chance to get some CEUs looking at some international work. You've had the chance to be able to talk to colleagues that have different cultural perspectives. Is this something that we should be looking at making mandatory? Is that we need to be able to kind of diversify where we're getting our own inputs to make decisions?
Yes, I think it's really important because it's not only about the language barrier. I know a lot of like a amazing BCBAs that are bilingual. Um, but like it's also sometimes when you share cultural background, it's easier to understand some things. So if we have more providers that have different cultural backgrounds, then it's going to be like the report, the everything changes. It's like incredibly, like even with someone that speaks your same language but you share cultural background, it's so much easier. You feel safe, you feel that you are being like understood, that they know what you're talking about. So I think it's really, and like you can build trust and you can build rapport even when you don't share cultural background, but we can also work on matching, of course, like having more providers with like different background to be able to start like working, and also developing like assessments that are not only for like a specific population, because sometimes it's really complicated when you say like, oh my god, I'm like trying to do an assessment, I'm like, oh, this will sound a little bit off, I don't know, I will like, but then you don't want to change the assessment because it's something that went through like a big process to be created. And if it's like that, it's for a reason, but sometimes it's just like it doesn't apply to this specific client. How can we have more people to create more resources for assessments, for programming, for books, for like information? We need that. We really need to go out there. We can start like working, of course, to provide more services. Like now what we did with the DEIB is like providing a group and a team that is available for interpretation all the time. That makes me so happy. And then the next step is how we are going now to increase diversity in our field of ABA, and how can we get more people. But I am also thinking that, for example, in Colombia, we don't have like a way to go to school to get a master's in ABA, because there are not. We don't have like a specialty in ABA. I have done some research about like the laws, because I really want to do something for my country. And it's like, yes, they know about ABA. They know that that's the most research intervention that has shown improvement, and like support for our autistic community. However, we don't have programs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think the BACB several years ago had pulled back a lot of their international credentials. So it kind of limited the chance to be able to share that knowledge. One of, like when I think of the industry and some of the big steps we've made in DEI, and I'll go away from kind of more of the culture that might deal with language or origin, and talk about the neurodiversity, is that there's been some huge movement on neurodiversity affirming care, assent-based care, community-informed practice, a lot of things that are bringing the voices of recipients of care into the decision-making process, into guiding clinicians on the values. What is it that you've worked on recently within the DEIB committee with ABS Kids, and that you found, okay, we're starting to make some headway? And what is it that you're thinking, this will be on the horizon? We still need to push and kind of create new priorities. So I guess it's a two-part question, but what are those two things that you're looking at?
So what we're looking at now, it's having like a spotlight for employees. So we really can know that it's like a space to share about you, but not only about your cultural background, for you as a person, and like knowing how different we are, even if we are from the same part, or the values that our employees have. Know about that. Sometimes we're just like stuck on like work, and we don't know who are we working with. We don't know who they are, and it's just so nice to be able to know about them. And I think that is going to improve, not like only um like maybe how our employees feel here, but also care. Because if we have better relationships, we can work more as a team, and it's so good. We will feel more comfortable maybe messaging someone from like a different region and like, hey, I know you know about these. Can I talk to you? So I think those spaces are super important because we are learning about so many different things. We do have a not only like cultural backgrounds but neurodiversity, and knowing that, hearing out our peers, how can we improve or like relationship with people, how can we better peers, better supervisors, better supervisees, knowing like all of those things about like the people that we work with. So this is like something that we are so happy to start. But also we are working on the DEI training. The DEI training, we are going to focus on what is DEI, because when sometimes I talk to people here at the center, I'm like, yes, I am part of the DEIV committee. And they're like, what is that? And so I'm super passionate and I can talk a lot about that. Then I'm like, I want everybody to know what DEI is. And if like maybe someone is really, really passionate about it, but they didn't know about it. So we can like start with that. But like our goal is going after that for like branches. And what is autism? What is being like an adult with autism. So yes, I'm autistic adult, and I we do have committee members who really want to participate on that and share like, hey, I think it's going to be easier for me at work if I do have this, if you communicate this way. So we can really learn how to communicate, how to change our interactions with our like neurodivergent like peers. So that's something that we are working on, like two different things, but with the same goal, that it's like improve, improve. Like
Absolutely.
what can we do? Like to like, of course, care is super important, but as a company that it's so big, it's super important that everyone is feeling that this is a safe place, that we can work as a team, that we can message someone from California. Hey, I need some resources. Do you mind sharing this? I know you're doing that. So I love that community that we are like creating and building.
No, I mean, culture, identity, there, I mean, it's so broad. I mean, there's so many things that the more that we're exploring, the more that we're willing to learn and become aware, the better we're going to be as clinicians. But I think also the better we're going to be as colleagues, the better we're going to be with creating our relationships outside of work. So it's such an important skill. For listeners, you've done a lot of the work to try and inform yourself. And like you said, with most concepts, it's the resources aren't necessarily handed to you. You got to look for them. So where can our listeners go to learn more, get more involved in DEI initiatives? Where can they go for resources or just even a starting point?
Well, like as you say, there are so many branches. So I when I usually like need to do something, I need specific information about the specific topic. Of course, I go usually to the databases for like resources of like articles, research that we have like done. But also, I have been trying to look into what are like the Spanish resources specifically. That has been my main point, and like see what are like the assessments that are available in Spanish. So I can share with you some of the links that I have found, because we have like specific forms for specific interviews. that are so much easier when you have that available and you don't have to translate a maybe changing a word that will not sound the best. They go and they're like proof before like having that specifically questionnaire. There is also like ABA e-learning from Spain. And there is like also Colombia ABA. So that's information about ABA in Spanish from two different countries that it's so interesting. They have a lot of information. Um, I just want to like mention that if we want information, there's so many also like places about gender biased diversity training. Why we have WIVA, like how can we create like inclusive and equitable access. I usually go to the databases for that, but for families, for parents, how can we do that? Usually I go try to see what we have about ABA, so that's why I found about ABA Spain, ABA Colombia, and we have those resources that are available in different languages. I was going to look something into Portuguese. I love Portuguese, so I was looking into that too. Um, but yeah, if someone needs something, I am more than happy to share all what I have found.
No, and I think that, like you said, is that it's all out there. It's just taking the time to commit to learning and to wanting to explore the thoughts, the ideas, and the perspectives. And I'd also encourage folks to get involved in the DEI committees. It's you don't always have to be the one setting the agenda. Is that even just being there, listening, learning from others, sharing your own perspective is adding so much value to the discussion and then eventually to whatever policies, decisions, advancements could occur. But Milena, I appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing and bringing awareness and challenging all of us to continue to evolve our science to look beyond our narrow walls.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, of course, if you're part of the DEIV committee, we all had our processes. We all had to go through the self-reflection, knowing that we need to keep learning. That's how it works. Keep learning. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.